So, Manfredi, let's start with you because you have a long history in the region, in the Middle East region. You're based, I believe, in Monaco.
Yes.
You have operations within the Middle East, and you've traveled there extensively as a younger man. So tell me how you've seen the opportunities for hospitality and tourism change in that time span that you've been visiting in the Middle East and the GCC in particular.
Well, I started going to the Middle East when I was 18, so long time ago. My father had business there. I did my personal first business as a young man in the Middle East in supplying pipes to Aramco. And I've been traveling there a lot, so I've seen most of it. I've seen Saudi Arabia as it was 50 years ago. I've been to Yemen. I've been to Dubai at its beginning, Abu Dhabi, Oman many times also. And I've always admired the culture of the Middle East. What I love about it, is its authenticity. So I disagree with somebody who said it's becoming anglicized. No, I love that the Middle East is authentic. Authentic in the personality of the people, and you see how proudly they wear their own traditional clothes, and how they have human relations. When you have a bonding in the Middle East, it's a bonding for life. So it's a different world, but a beautiful world. And it's not only a beautiful world for the people, it's a beautiful world for many things which are there. And if you look at it from the panorama of how it was and how it is now, it was a country with beautiful sea, historical sites, nature, and so on. And now it is a place where you go from Dubai, which is, from a European point of view, Miami, because it's lively,
or Vegas,
entertainment, right? Fun. You have Abu Dhabi and Qatar with beautiful museums. You have Oman, of course, with the historical sites from Salalah to Muscat and the desert. Then up the region in Saudi Arabia. Recently, I've been all over Saudi Arabia. The Minister of Culture was so kind to allow me to visit with helicopters and everything. And we went from the north of the what is called Neom area,
right?
All along the coast, the Free Bays, Amala, and then by helicopter we arrived at Al Ula, which was breathtaking, the arrival there. I went to Jeddah, which of course I knew 50 years ago, and changed, some for the worse because a lot had been demolished, and now it's being rebuilt. And Riyadh, when I went there the first time, it was 150,000 people. Now, I don't know, many millions, 7.5 million. So it's amazing. But the variety, I think it's a fantastic place. Culture, tradition, food, hospitality, natural beauties, historical sites, new developments. The most beautiful architecture now is not Chicago anymore. It used to be Chicago. Now it's Qatar or Abu Dhabi or Dubai. And it's going to be also Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So it's a great perspective. I'm very enthusiastic about the region. We, as Abercrombie and Kent, we are discussing. We have a destination management company which handles people who go to visit it. We want to build camps for the moment in Saudi Arabia. We're looking at other things. I chartered to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia the cruise ship to start operating in the Red Sea, cruising. It was a success.
Is that through Crystal?
No, it was Silver Sea at the time.
Okay, right.
Silver Sea was the only company
Sea,
which
right.
did not stop going to the Middle East after the towers, September 11th. We continued. We are persistent. We support destinations, and we're not there only to take advantage. We're there always. No, it was Silver Sea. I chartered a ship. It was a great success. Right. And they discovered that the Saudi population likes to take vacations in Saudi and get to know the beautiful places that are in their country.
Right. Julia, give us a sort of macro perspective on the Middle East and the GCC. Where do you see the development of tourism and how do you see the development of tourism and hospitality in the last 5 years, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me, and well done to Oman for sponsoring this. Oman's a wonderful country, and I've been there a few times. So the big picture on travel and tourism, we work with Oxford Economics. We represent world travel and tourism. We've got about 200 CEOs. One of them is Manfredi, who is our member. And we've been, for about 30 years, we've been looking at what is the economic impact and value. We now do it on sustainability as well to travel and tourism. So the big thing to say is that before the pandemic, travel and tourism was growing constantly for 9 consecutive years. Then we lost 50% of our value. And now, over the next 10 years, we're predicted to grow at double the rate of GDP. Wow. So it is a really massive growth sector. And the way to look at it is to say that 1 in $10 that's created on this planet come from travel and tourism, and 1 in 10 jobs that are created on this planet come from travel and tourism. And there are also jobs that we call sort of direct entry jobs, and we can talk later about the impact of AI. But one of the things is, as Manfredi was saying, about authenticity. The great thing about travel and tourism and jobs is you might be able to do a lot of the planning, the searching, the looking, the inspiration, the booking, but people want authenticity. And the Middle East provides that, as Manfredi was saying. So the numbers are looking very good. And if you look at Middle East, we're talking about a business that's a contribution to their GDP that's worth about $450 billion. And we're expecting that to grow to about $600 billion over the next 10 years. So it's got a lot of opportunities.
So what are some of the challenges, though, to getting more tourists, more travelers to the Middle East that your members tell you about? Yeah, so I think one of the things that Middle East are very good at, and they've got much, much better at, is things like what stops people traveling. One thing's of visas. Yes. You know, so the Middle East, Dubai is very, very easy. As you know, you can get a visa like that. Saudi Arabia is just, and Oman have introduced new visa systems. So that is the first thing. The second is you need to feel safe and secure. And those countries feel very, very safe and secure. You need those 2 things. Then you've got to have the infrastructure. So I think, in fact, at the minute, the Middle East is growing faster than a lot of other areas in the world, and it's because some of those things. I don't know if any of you have transferred through Dubai. It's been absolutely incredible. It's an average 13-minute experience, which for some of us that have had not such good experiences in other parts of the world, and it's gone completely biometric. So there's none of these fingers. I'm telling all the ministers, I was at the G20 and I told ministers, get rid of these digital things. You know, lots of people got rid of it after the pandemic because people didn't want to put their fingers on things, but it's all got to be biometric. We've got we've got a great member like Vision Box that just brings in all those. So you should really just be able to walk through and it should all be biometric. And I think the Saudis that were having a mix are now thinking of also going entirely biometric. What are the other challenges? Inflation, but inflation impacts on all of us, all sectors. The other challenge is sustainability, and it was very interesting talking about AI because often airlines, which basically provide our lift, they support our sector absolutely entirely and are part of our sector, and they've often been held up as a sort of the pin-up boys of destroying the world in terms of sustainability. But the reality is AI now and all the searches we're doing, in terms of carbon intensity, it is greater. All our use of IT with all those great big data centers around the world that need to be cooled than it is flying on an aeroplane. Now, that is not to shame one sector against another sector. It's just to try and put it in context. And I was very pleased to hear about Aramco because we're talking to Aramco and the big oil producers to please produce a degree of sustainable aviation fuel. That is the fastest way that airlines are going to be able to decarbonise at the minute, but it's not within the airline's control. It is the energy producers, the big oil producers, and it's governments to ensure that governments give the right fiscal support to airlines to be able to, and to energy producers to produce SAF. SAF is really important. We're only producing 0.05% of what we need. We use every molecule of it at the moment, but it's we did it at the G20, a big shout out to governments to really prioritise SAF production. The Americans in their Inflation Reduction Act, I can never quite get my head around that, the name of that act, but they are prioritising, and there's a lot of investment opportunities and a lot of jobs in SAF.
So it's a good thing to do all round.
So Marloes, you're one of those providers on the ground, and your company, Kerten, has an ESG focus. Why does it have an ESG focus? Why have you implemented that as a kind of founding principle? And how does that play out in your operations as you're expanding into the Middle East, as I understand it?
Actually, so we're a lifestyle operating company. We
Right.
have hotels, branded residences, service departments across the board. We actually started in the GCC for a very simple reason. When we started 8 years ago, and we did just a bit of research, 67% of the generations was below 35. And to change and implement lifestyle, the kind of philosophy that you need to have the big boxes, the good old brands that we all know, it's really hard in the European markets where pension funds are quite strict, where rules and regulations on zoning are quite strict, to get projects in that combine long stays and short stays, that combine working components, that look beyond the walls of the building that you just talked about, the heritage. We're operating Al Balat in Jeddah, we're operating Dar Tantura in Alula, but at the same time we're operating a former film camp that was converted into something historic. But when we built the company, one of the things that was always important, and that's part of our DNA, is that we include wherever we are. So we're inclusive, not exclusive. We go by brand guidelines, not brand standards, which allow us to go into a market, go into a place and say, who's there, what's there, what can we use, who can we work with, which comes to the social part of ESG, which has been what we do. We only started talking about it for the last 2 years because it became such a hot topic. And
Why?
One, because of COVID and the green part of ESG, right? The sustainability piece all of a sudden started to fly off. The social piece is something that's so hard. It's so hard to quantify. It's so hard to qualify. It's so hard to measure. It's so hard to report on. And common sense is not always what we use, right? So one of the things that we could see with our teams was, and definitely in the GCC, my head ESG is 23 years old, from the Bahamas,
Right.
with a German dad, lives in Germany. So she's two sides of the brain, right? One of the reasons part of my team, and Theo is here, is 23, 24, heading up business development for Europe. One of the reasons brought these people into the team, and not as, make a coffee or you're my assistant, but to lead, is because to them is a necessity in life. But buying a water filter in the supermarket at 1.5 euros is not a commodity in the GCC most of the time. Here, the salary scales are still very different. The way that we recruit people is still very different. And we're growing that out so much that we said, one, we give our ESG program a name. So we called it UBU, United Building a Better Universe. It has a butterfly, so it's cute, approachable, understandable, because the moment you say ESG, it's very strategic, it looks great, but it means nothing to our team members.
Well, then we have a question from the audience. Has ESG become a box-ticking exercise? Is there wellness washing, or what is the component of wellness washing in the hospitality sector, and how do you address that?
I think across the board, right? Is it greenwashing or not? I think before we start talking about greenwashing, or do we or do we not, unless we talk about it, unless we start small actions, nothing is ever going to change. When our industry, right, the hospitality is a little slower in adapting to new anything. If it comes to technology, we're the last ones. If it comes to airports, they're the first ones. We go last. We just come whenever everything is done, right? In ESG, we can actually make an impact and an effort. But to Julia's point, right, unless governments define what the building codes are, unless building materials are much wider available, it doesn't make sense to bring solar panels from South America to the GCC and create a carbon footprint. Unless we start working on it, and yes, it will be greenwashing for a while, because unless we talk about it, nothing will happen. But it's really an educational process first, before anything else.
Manfredi, do you see your clients, your customers, whether they're on one of the cruise line or taking part in one of the camps, are you seeing an interest in ESG? What is driving, do you think? How important is sustainability, I guess I would ask, in their choices about where they go and how they get there?
So my experience is the following. First of all, if you want to do ESG, it is not about words. So there's too much about you have to say something because it's politically correct, ESG. We were in Saudi Arabia. There was a lady, a top model. She started saying a speech, well-being, burnt out. It was embarrassing. You have to do the things that you believe in. So we believe in it because we're good citizens of the world and because it's our product. We sell nature.
Right.
So to sell nature, you must preserve nature. If you don't preserve nature, you can't sell it. If you bring people to a beach which is full of rubbish, people don't want to go there. So you have to act to protect the world, the environment, and other things. So that is what I think. So that's how we act. And apart from that, we are in communities, and we have to work with the community. So Abercrombie & Kent has a very large program of sustaining the communities. We provide equipment for making the water drinkable in Kenya. We have a hospital in Uganda. We do a number of these things whenever there is the necessity to help or the opportunity, because it's also an opportunity. And on the ships, we're now launching 2 new ships. I had a company called Silver Sea. I sold it. I'm launching a new one. And the ships are going to be at the top standards. We bought them from a company which had gone broke, and we are relaunching them top standards. The new ones we're going to do are going to be all top standards. It's a good behavior, and it's also a way to develop your company. Now, people are willing to pay more? No. But if they have to choose, they will prefer the ones who are better. So It's a cost that you have to carry.
Marloes, you mentioned the youth of your company, but that's a topic that we've talked about here in different conversations about again, and you mentioned it, the overall youth of the populations in the Middle East, which is both an opportunity and sometimes a challenge. How do you address the labor issues for your own projects in the region?
I would say mainly staying relevant or being relevant. And I think this is, every generation has their problems or their changes. This generation at the moment opens 20 apps at the same time, and average spend on an app is 20 to 30 seconds. So the expectation that somebody will do the same role for 8 hours in the same position, doing the same thing, is quite unrealistic. And again, industry-wide, it's quite hard to implement multitasking just because it's a pure psychological thing. If it's the promotion, this is my job, that's not my job. But what we're working on is really to create that journey where you almost feel in charge of the place, where you need lesser people or higher qualified people, or you take people that are younger and that you promote in a much faster manner. But I think it's not just a matter of, because today we still have so many people that want to work for us. We're not suffering that problem in our projects today, and we have 50 plus projects. So it's there. Yes, there is a problem. Yes, it's not easy, but also I think by just the classic way, we need 250 people in 6 months, and let's go fly to 3-4 different locations and bring people. That philosophy, mentality doesn't work anymore.
Julia, do you see that among your members in that region? The sense of dealing with labor issues, are they not as significant as maybe I believe? And how are your other members approaching how they staff their growing businesses in the region?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think the issue around labor is a very regional question. So if I can use the word sort of developed world, which I know isn't, but in Europe and the US, there are some really tight pinch points, most definitely. But actually, in a lot of these sort of younger countries in terms of travel and tourism, there is a lot of labour. I mean, in fact, the challenge is how do you train the labour?
Right.
So Saudi Arabia is doing a great job opening up various colleges, and a lot of our members are working with them. You know, Hilton has established, IHG have established sort of training places to actually bring people on. So it really isn't so much of an issue there.
Right.
But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I definitely enjoy travel, and I look forward to visiting some of your establishments in the future. So thank you very much.